thank you, sorry. Okay, start again. Welcome to the Eureka Springs Parks Workshop, March 1st, 2022, 6 o'clock. We're at the auditorium. Do we, I know we have a, God, I've got too many things printed up here. Scott sent out several things for all of us to look at. Do I need to do a roll call at workshops?
No.
Not really. You can see us here. Okay. Okay.
We will do if when we have the special meeting.
I'd like to make sure we remember we've got a special meeting tonight too, to vote for the, what's it called?
Minutes.
Minutes, thank you. Yeah, I think my brain is frazzled, so. I think we'll start with the workshop, and if that's okay with everybody, and then switch to the special meeting after that. Is that okay? Okay. I have a list of topics that we have as discussion topics. Scott also has this list. We've sent the list. We've got so many things on here, I'm not sure. You just said a minute ago, your priorities. You want to kind of start with that and give us some of your priorities?
Yes, in fact, there's a few things that I just need to report. I'll do so real quickly.
Okay.
Things that weren't even at issue when this came up. I did email the commission last week a grant application that we had applied for. This was through Sandy Formica's company. You might recall we paid $10,000 or up to $10,000 for their consulting services. They are helping us with pursuit of an NRCS grant. There was also the grant that I sent to you by email. I did make a mistake on my cover email, by the way, and thank you, Pat, for pointing that out to me. I think I said something like $35,000 was going to be our match. It's actually $55,000. Okay. There's some other match in kind, but that's also over a several-year period of time. I think the whole grant goes between roughly the later part of this year through 2026, if I recall correctly. None of this, of course, is up for a vote tonight, but I just wanted to prepare you because that's a lot of money. And if we need to talk about it this evening, we can, but we have a few months to go before everything's official. It's pending the funding by the EPA, so we will not know 100% for sure for another couple of months. I'm told that the funding is routine, that the state determines who gets the grant money, and then the EPA, just once a year when their budget comes in, they fund it. So that's good news. The other good news that I just found out this morning is Kylie Heverdes has been working with us to put together a historic preservation plan out at Lake Leatherwood. We have a lot of old buildings out there that a lot of people are not even aware of, and we did receive a $39,000 grant for the first step of that, which is an assessment of all of our, and this is by professionals, an assessment of our historical sites. And then phase 2, which we'll apply for next year, would be for the actual preparation of a professionally done historic preservation plan. And this is one of the many elements of what we're trying to do for a complete master plan, is we are engaging experts to assess where we are. One of the third things would be we're meeting with engineers tomorrow on the Basin Park assessment. So we're making progress on all these. Unfortunately, no grants on that one to report. So that's where we are. And finally, the third grant we're just now applying for, but we have another forestry grant that would be supplemental to the grant that we had for the glade restoration and the forestry initiative that we're doing. It's a much larger grant, a couple $100,000 that we're optimistic for. Mm-hmm. So things are going well there. One last thing I just will pass out to you. I had emailed you all a list of work prioritizations. There are 3 new ones up at the top. The yellow are the highlighted ones that we plan to start over the next month. We've added 3 items. The auction is finally on for this month, and it's all online. We're working on that. Also, the hairpin turn in front of our office on Spring Street, that is our property. We're going to clear that of the, all the brush that's there now, and it'll probably be planted with native plants, but stuff that's low, that doesn't block the vision of people who are going around that turn. And finally, the art that was donated through the Arts Council should be placed in Harmon Park, hopefully over the next 30 days or so, if you want to pass those on. Was there?
How many pieces is that?
Well, there's 3 that are these metal structures with sort of stained glass, but it's very thick, can't be broken. It's like half an inch or more thick. There's 3 of those, so it's 3, but it's sort of one piece of art. And then there were the other ones you might recall were sort of fireflies that are going to hang out of the trees.
Yeah. Metal and glass.
Yeah, metal and lights for fireflies.
So where in Harmon Park are they going?
The metal and glass are going to go as you're coming across the road from Spring Garden Trail. There's that little bridge. There'll be one on each side of the bridge, sort of at an angle, and then the other one will be just beyond the bridge. And then the lights or fireflies will be over by the playground. There's a tree that is just adjacent to the bathrooms, and so we'll have the power from there, and it'll be low voltage light, but they'll hang out of those trees.
Scott, I got 2 of them, but I missed the third.
The third, well, there are 2
There's only
pieces of
2.
art. Yeah, there's only 2.
Oh, I
There's
thought
the-
you said 3.
No.
Okay.
Well, the first one was the metal and glass. There are 3 pieces, but it's one
Okay,
bit
thank you.
apart.
Placement.
Yes. Okay. The next thing, is that okay just to move on?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
You said your priority.
The next thing, I did send out the request for proposal in draft form, and I highlighted the things that were, let's say, unique to this request for proposal. Again, there's nothing for us to vote on in this meeting tonight, but I am looking for input. I would like to get this, although, again, I'm not asking for a vote tonight, because I would like to get this rolling and get past some of the delays that we have. For instance, we have to post this, publish it for 2 weeks. I would like to go ahead and do that at this point. So I'd like some feedback from the commission as to, again, we can't vote on it, but I don't know at this point if we have anybody that has any opposition to it or positive comments. So I just would like to hear what the commission has to
Scott,
say.
I have a question. So in the discussion at the last meeting, you had made the comment that you were ordering porta potties and different things. Did I understand that? But I think I kind of dismissed you because that didn't seem like something park staff should be doing. It's the promoters. But have you ended up doing those functions?
Well, we haven't had any of these functions since I've been the director, but I do know in the past, those things are passed on to, in one form or another, those things are passed on to the promoters. So, and I don't know how the previous director did that.
Well, that's not always been the case. In the
Right.
past, when I was putting on events, we had to do it directly. We paid for all the porta potties. We had to provide enough based on the number of participants that we expected so that we weren't reliant on the parks facilities, so it didn't overload the septic system.
Right.
I do know that the last few years that Fat Tire Festival was put on, that Huss provided those for them and paid for them. Now, we have discussed that, and that is something that we decided last year would be the promoter's responsibility in the future, and should
Yeah,
be.
yes.
What-
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the promoters for an event that, again, I'm not taking action on at this point, but we've had discussions, had asked about porta potties and such, and I told him that the commission's view was that those were things that they needed to provide, and not that we didn't want to help facilitate things, but I don't even want parks to be in the position of ordering and being responsible for getting those things there, even if someone else is going to pay for it. I know there's been at least one large event in the past where we were left holding the bag, and the promoter didn't pay all of the bills. And secondly, if there's a failure somewhere and we don't get porta potties there, I don't want it to be Parks' responsibility. So
Again, this is one of the reasons why we've proposed this in the first place. Any reputable event promoter knows that he's going to be providing them and would be required anywhere.
Yeah, well, I know where I used to work. I mean, I wasn't involved in event planning, but I know the people they were. They would give out, it was either contract or letter of understanding, I forget what they called it. The people did not get a permit up front. They were allowed to go ahead and promote the event and organize putting it on, but in that letter, there was a clear understanding. You have to provide these documents. You have to show proof you've ordered the toilets, proof of insurance.
Yeah.
And until, you did not get your permit until all that was in place.
Well, that's one of the reasons we're going through this process. There has been no defined process on how these large events happen. That's why we're here.
In the recent past. And again, I'm going to keep saying that.
Sure.
It has been the recent past.
Okay.
It was not that way before.
Right.
Recent past or otherwise, I mean, the point is we currently have no guidance, no directives on how these events are going to take place. One way or another, even if we're not the ones that are physically ordering and paying for porta potties and dumpsters and whatnot, it still is a lot of time and effort to have these events going on in our parks. And I do not believe that we should be in the promotion business, that we should be in the business of making our venue as appealing as can be for these events, but that somebody else needs to be actually doing the promotion and the planning, et cetera.
Yeah, but I don't get why a single promoter cannot do that, why someone just doing one event cannot do that. And I'm thinking of you, Kevin. I know you had the ability as a local resident to put in events on in the park near where you lived, but we're taking that away. People won't be able to come up and say, I've got this great idea for an event, I want to put it on, because we already have a contract with someone else to put on the events.
But I think that's part of the point, is that nobody's putting them on. That Tire Festival died because there was nobody to put it on. I would not put on an event right now because you cannot get any sponsorship in this town, and you can't get any support in this town. Volunteer support. I mean, the last time we put the event on, we brought, all of our volunteers came from over in the corridor, every single one of them. And all of our sponsors came from over in the corridor, for the most part.
The individual promoter idea it isn't feasible the same way it was a long time ago anyway.
No, it's not.
It's too expensive. You just don't see as, like you said, we're taking that away, but they don't seem to be there. I mean, they're.
Well, we can't judge the last couple of years because.
Well, I mean, the market out there, when you start reading about how other parks and venues and large places do their large events, athletic events, everyone I read was all professional promoters now because it's such a big.
You're not going to find an individual event promoter anywhere.
And a big
Yeah, but I mean, it may be one of the same promoters that would do the 5 events would do one event, and then at least we'd get to see how they work, establish the relationship, and then if we want to expand. But now, if we sign this contract and it turns out to be someone we don't like, we can't really do anything about it. We're kind of stuck. And I just don't quite see. We've gone from not having events to really kind of tying our hand to how we're doing it.
Well, if I may,
Yes.
I have the same reservations that I stated the last meeting, which is we have a CAPC whose mission is to promote. They have a much larger budget than Parks has. And I would see collaboration with the CAPC as a way forward more easily given Parks' cash-strapped circumstances. So I don't know if any effort has gone in that direction.
I have meetings with CAPC on a regular basis. And they are in the business of promoting tourism. They're not in the business of promoting events.
They do promote events, though.
They have a limited number of events that they promote. They are not going to go put on a downhill race or a cross-country race. And we had the conversation about that Tire Festival.
Yeah, that's the problem.
There is nobody in either of our organizations to put on that event. We would have to go out and hire somebody, which is what we were doing. We were looking to hire somebody. This is an opportunity for us to find a promoter that we are not paying. They will be
Right.
paying us for the use of the park.
Yes.
The deal that we had on Fat Tire Festival was going to cost us at least $30,000 between the two commissions. And that doesn't make any sense. We shouldn't be using public money to put on events. The events ought to be self-supporting and they ought to provide revenue. And if we do this correctly, then that's exactly what it will do.
And I have other comments I'd like to offer, which is, as some of you, I sent belatedly today my comments and suggestions on the RFP. The thing that I find glaring is the failure to recognize and include the natural assets at the park. And I feel that that does a disservice both to the park itself potentially, as well as to whoever is hired as promoter. And I think I documented how many critical habitats, how many species of concern are out in that park. Now, does park have a plan? Does parks have a plan for monitoring, overseeing, educating, doing all the things that need to be done in order to protect those things in the park that badly need protection?
So my question would be, how do you expect us to do that on a daily basis? Because there are people out on the trails on a daily basis.
Well, I don't know how you do it on a daily basis, Kevin,
Well,
and I would like to know.
My thought, too, on that is, I think, in my mind, is two separate things. There's the areas of the park where we focus on preservation, rather,
And what are they?
and nature. And then there's parts where we have recreation, and we have activities, and we have events. And yes, we still have to protect it in both, but I don't know. I just feel like, I don't think you can apply the same.
Yeah, I mean,
What areas in the park are currently protected?
Protected? Well, we're working on the glades getting protected.
right.
Are we?
That's what I mean, that kind of thing is what we're working towards, is separate areas versus trails being for recreation.
Those are really tiny areas, and then there are other areas too.
And that's the grant that Chris and Steve
Right.
put together, is to identify other areas
150
that are
acres.
worth restoration, that we can afford to restore and maintain properly. But the park itself was built as a recreational facility. It was turned over to the city as a recreational facility.
It was just, no, I've seen the deed as well. It was just given over for public use. That's what it was given over for.
Right.
And,
But it was built as a recreational facility.
but it was given to the city just for public use. Now, given our current circumstances, culturally and globally, when people are searching and willing to pay good money to come here to have an experience of relatively undisturbed areas or a park, I think that you are, shooting yourselves in the foot if you don't place value on those things. And I didn't see that in the RFP, and I haven't seen that in any parks plans. And I would like to see that.
Well, I think that's a
think-
bit unfair, Pat, because
No,
that's
well-
exactly what the Glade study is, and that's exactly what the Glade exercise is.
Yeah, to be clear, I really support the grade restoration, but it actually may open up some of those areas to more disturbance if we open up and let the public, in there. So it's not just clear just because you restore them that you've protected them. You have to take all the factors into account.
Well, there's
Kevin,
been
well,
questions.
how many acres would you estimate are currently being restored as glades? How many acres in the park?
Currently, I have no idea. What's the acreage of the current project?
The current work that's going on is relatively small. It's our initial glade. In fact, we
Right.
have been calling it the educational glade because we're learning as we go. We have several subject matter experts that are included in that process, and we are applying for a grant. In fact, I was told through a text message that the final changes that I asked to have on that grant application were done today. That would be 150 acres total for the glades that we're looking at restoring. But we've got way more than that that's going on. I would like to remind the commission that we have we call it the Native Plant Collaborative. It was something the community center wanted something to benefit the public for us using the greenhouse. I put together this collaborative between parks, the community center, the master naturalists, the master gardeners, and the wild ones, where we are doing classes on Saturdays. I'm doing this on my own time. This is something that I believe in. We're doing classes. We are growing out thousands of native plants that will be planted in the gardens at Lake Leatherwood, et cetera. So that's a big part of what we're doing. The time that we're spending applying for grants for water quality for the lake to deal with the invasive species that are growing in the lake. I mean, these are all things that we are doing now that, to my knowledge, these sorts of things have not been done in the past. So I want everyone, the commission and the public, likewise, to understand the commitment that I personally have to habitat restoration, to protecting the land, our species that are out there, dealing with invasive species, dealing with trying to get the native plant populations reestablished. These are things that I'm spending countless hours, and I say I because, even on my own time. And so please don't underestimate my commitment, and I believe the Commission's commitment, even those who want to see the this RFP go out, and those of you that don't. I believe that we all have an interest in preserving this park, our parks, plural. And so that's not something that we would allow some events to come in and thwart. The events that have taken place in the past haven't had the type of planning that this will enable us to do. This will enable us to work with one source to make sure that we have plans in place for everything from safety, requiring things like that they have a side-by-side vehicle properly equipped with backboards and first aid equipment and whatnot, to making sure that that we are, or that they are using only the areas that we want, treating them the way we want, because we'll be dealing with the same person, and we'll have well thought out contractual language that requires them to comply with these things. That's where we're going with this. And I would also remind you that this is just a request for proposals. That we could go in so many directions from here. We might get 0 responses. We might get 100 responses, and many of them just fabulous, and have to really consider long and hard which of these great applications are the best. I don't know what direction we're going to go into. We don't know until we put this out there. But please keep in mind the request for proposals is getting their proposals, what they have to offer. Once we select one as the top responder, we then enter into negotiations with that company for a formal contract. And until we have a contract that this commission votes for and says, yes, this contract covers everything that we want, including all the things that you just mentioned, then we don't have a deal. So this is the first step. This is like going to the car dealer and window shopping and saying, how many miles per gallon does this vehicle get? How much does it cost, et cetera. In addition, we have to have 3 people to assess this. Be one of the people that sit on the committee to assess this. And I don't mean to, I'm trying to look at everyone. I don't need to just look at you. The point is, this is a process, and you have the opportunity to be involved in the process or not, depending on your time and interest. But this is not some.
Scott,
Yes, ma'am.
I don't want to be, I would be so sad if I thought I was the only one sitting here who does not place value on the park's natural assets.
Sure.
I would be very sad if everybody on this commission did not support that.
Yeah.
And that is my point. And what I am saying is I see that little reflected in the RFP. Now you say, well, wait, we will negotiate that. If you don't have it as at least a clear item in the RFP, the people you get are not going to be suitable for what I think what the park needs, and what I hope you think the park needs. And
Well,
I don't question your commitment to anything,
Well,
Scott.
Pat,
I
I
really
think
don't.
what you're putting in here is inappropriate for the RFP because that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for someone to put on an event. The contract will have language in it
Like you're
If I
that
may,
dictates where, okay.
for example, in the introduction, it says it's a blend of natural, Eureka is a blend of natural environment and historic man-made structures. And on. Features at the park include a spring-fed lake, 3 ball fields, multi-use trails, downhill bike trails, a marina. There's nothing in there that mentions any restore areas under restoration or areas under protection. There is nothing in there.
Okay, I have two ways to
I
respond.
don't-
I have a suggestion. And I think what's going to work for this is to keep and I think you had said this, there would be no extra trails built because of this, but to keep
No.
the people putting on these events within the footprint of what's already out there.
Yes.
I think as we go into master planning, we do need to really address what Patty's bringing up and the ideas of refugia and areas that are undisturbed, where we don't have trails. So if the wildlife, gets pushed out of one area because of all the use, they have somewhere else to go and hang out. And I think that really needs to get brought in, but it's probably later in the master planning process that we need to
Right.
address that.
And I have two comments.
And just one more thing, and I would like some just general language that we don't, disturb the natural habitats, just so it's in there and people know.
Well, and
Right,
that's what
so-
it should be. I mean, that was, again, the contract that I had to sign clearly stipulated that I could not alter, modify, or run any events off of the established trails. I mean, that should be pro forma language any place.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
you're not going to let
But then did someone monitor? Was there someone from Parks monitoring how you conducted?
at that point in time, no, there wasn't.
Okay.
It was
Well-
me. I was the one. But
Well-
since I was the one that was doing most of the trail maintenance at that time,
Well, will there be someone who will do that when you get a response, if you get an appropriate response to the RFP?
Yeah.
Who at Parks, and how will someone at Parks monitor and the promoter and the event? How will that be monitored?
part of it's his responsibility.
Yeah.
Part of it's going to be the trails coordinator,
And that
The
is
end of the event to make sure.
is
Sam
it
Dudley.
Sam, okay.
And isn't it
I mean,
the same people who do it today?
that's not a position that existed
It's just
before last year.
same people who do it every day.
Every day,
all
you're right.
day.
That's right.
Like,
That's their normal job anyway.
If we're not monitoring that every day, all day, then it's pointless. I mean,
That's a good point.
My point is, that's part of the existence of a park and a park staff, is they have to constantly monitor what people are doing in there, whether there's an event there or there's not an event there, or whether 20 of my family members meet there and we wander all over the whole park.
Well,
At some point, we have to take responsibility for monitoring where people go and where they don't go.
Well,
Well, there-
I don't have, and I'm new to the commission, but I don't have a grasp of to whom that responsibility falls other than Scott. Now, it's Sam. Does Sam have help with this when there's an event going on? Help with someone who is knowledgeable about the parks and its natural assets? Does Sam, how knowledgeable is Sam about these things?
I think that's all very important. I'm not discounting that, but I agree that the RFP and that are two different
Different
things.
things.
Yes.
Yeah.
And-
Are they?
If we need to deal with that,
Well,
we need to
okay.
deal with it regardless if there's an RFP or not.
And if I could respond, there were a couple of different questions that came that I don't know that I've been able to adequately respond to. So first of all, how do we go about making sure that those sorts of issues are in our final contract? We put them there. They're not in the request for proposals because we're not asking for somebody to tell us how to maintain the park and maintain its natural resources. We're asking for somebody to plan events. We will dictate how those natural resources are going to be protected. They can go in the contract, and that, in fact, is what happened when I sent this out. Ruth, for instance, said, well, what do we have to do to deal with making sure that we're dealing with somebody who's ethical? And so I took a code of conduct. I said, yeah, we could have a code of conduct. And so it was that easy. The same day that she asked, I actually took the code of conduct that I had prepared for the bike vendors and made a few changes. And this is something that will go into our contract that they are going to be required to comply with. All it took was Ruth asking for it. And I mean, I assume the commission may want to approve that. But we have a code of conduct now that would be included in the contract. We can do a preservation plan of some sort that would apply to this, and that will become part of the contract. The nice thing about using a single source instead of these ad hoc promoters that come in and want to do an event, if we have 5 events this year, we're going to have to educate 5 different people on what we expect for them using our park. If we have one person that has a contract, or one company that has a contract over multiple years, we're educating one person to a level of depth that we can't do with independent, multiple vendors.
And to what Pat said, you check on their work, and when they're done, if we don't like, we have a contract.
And
If they
so-
didn't fulfill their contract and they didn't do what they were told, we can get out of the contract.
So just as we have a code of conduct, and I would say whether the commission authorizes this request for proposals to go out or not,
Well,
maybe
it's
we
already-
do.
Let's be clear.
Well,
This has already been authorized to go out. What you've done is asked for feedback. But it is, we voted on it.
You did.
Have authority
You
to
did.
Put out an RFP.
okay.
Yes,
So
we gave you feedback, and
So that being said, whether the RFP results in a binding contract, I should say, perhaps we should look at not just a code of conduct, but a code of conduct as to those natural resources. That would apply to any vendor in the park, for instance. What is it that we want them to do or not to do? We define it, and it becomes, just as I expect that this code of conduct will be attached to any contract that might result from this request for proposal, we could have a code of, I mean, I don't know what we would call it, code of,
You just simply put a performance clause in.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
this is not brain surgery. This goes on all the time.
right. And they probably, a lot of these people that do outdoor events probably already have their own thing about how they preserve the flora and fauna, et cetera, and we can,
Well,
Well,
I would point out that my last experience with a contract from parks predates everybody but Ruth. And there were some disastrous consequences from that contract. And it was negotiated by the then executive director. And I would really hate to see something like that repeated.
Okay, well, that executive director isn't here anymore, and I'm willing to give Scott the benefit of the doubt until we see something that proves otherwise.
But again, I mean, I will contend from now until forever that it is not out of place. It does not conflict with the RFP to include in it some mention.
Some mention, I don't disagree with some mention. It
Sue
doesn't
said
need
a
to
vague-
be-
a
It
vague
doesn't need to be a
mention is probably
paragraph
what is
that doubles
appropriate.
the length of the description. And there was one in here that you had, basically stating that they're responsible, where did I put that? While protecting the plant and animal species of conservation concern and their habitats from disturbance. Are you going to go out and identify that? for them?
No, Parks is.
Parks is.
Park
Scott, you're going to go out and
staff.
identify every flora and fauna of concern?
I will educate them as to what those particular species are, et cetera, but
But again, it's
I
not
can't
material. If you
babysit.
look at,
And like
if you
Mark said,
look at what
do
the
whatever you want.
RFP is evaluated on, which is, what, page 10? It doesn't fit in there. That's not what we're looking for from them to get to the point where we start a negotiation that's going to include that kind of detail.
I differ.
And you're free to disagree.
Well,
But-
I disagree.
And I would say this, that if I look at the manual, that in fact I did, the day that I got this job, I got the manual. I said, okay, what are my duties here? And one of them is to attract events like the events that we're talking about.
Yes.
This is going to be the best and easiest way. If we don't want these sorts of events to take place, then please change that job description. That will, now, I think these sorts of events are good, but just like other issues that we're going to talk about tonight, my job's easy because I don't have a vote in the matter. If we want to have these big events, then the best way to do it is to have a single source that we can educate in all of the ramifications of what we need in a promoter.
We have more control that way.
Otherwise, sure, we could make this off limits to events. I don't think the public wants that. I don't think the commission wants that. But my point is that if we are going to have events, they need to be well-planned and coordinated. And the more we have a single source that we are controlling versus these ad hoc events that strangers, people that we don't necessarily know are coming in to do an event and they're going to be gone tomorrow. Well, that is probably a recipe for disaster. Having a single, coordinated, well-thought-out promoter, to me, that's more of a recipe for success. But I'll go about it however the commission wishes. But again, this is something that, at this point, we've got the request for proposal. I can go ahead and, at this point, publish it. We'll get responses, but until we have negotiated a contract with one of the responders, we don't have, and we may not even get to that point. I'd remind that the last, or second to the last RFP that we did, that was one of the first things that happened when I was appointed interim director, and it did not result in a contract. And it was because we wanted specific performance standards that we couldn't agree on. And when I couldn't get performance standards that I wanted, we didn't go any further.
Right.
So
No, and I think it's perfectly reasonable in, where was it, page 8, section 2 of requirements, where it's giving a description of the park to make a mention of the glades and some of the other areas of concern. But to put into this an implication that this person, whoever it's going to be, is going to be required to protect all areas of conservation concern, when we haven't even agreed on what those areas of conservation concern are. All you're going to do is prevent people from responding to this.
Well, then strike that one. Strike that one.
Yeah,
I mean, my operating theory is that always in negotiations, someone has to be there to stand and voice for the ideal. Now, did all my comments ask for the ideal? No, they did not. I think it's entirely reasonable to mention the habitats and the endangered, or the species of concern in the park. Those are valuable. Those have high value. They deserve good, solid protection.
What I've just learned tonight is we have a very definite need for a conservation plan for the park that has nothing really to do with the RFP itself,
Correct.
but something that would be adopted by the commission and would apply to anybody coming into the park, whether it's for a large event or for a picnic. And so I think that I'll
Yeah. Well,
gather a small group
There
of
is something-
committee
yeah,
to draft such.
A lot of this should apply to park staff as they do their operations, because that's more controllable. And you're likely the ones that are going to make the big changes. So, if you're putting in a new trail, is that going through a rare plant area? I mean, that is a question that should be answered before that trail is put in. And I know it hasn't been policy, but that's the kind of thing I'm hoping that we can put in place at some point.
I mean, I think in a practical sense, just theoretically, we could talk all day about what could or couldn't do, but practically, if Scott has a person that comes to him with this proposal and we all look at it, now that single person is the person that will come back and say, okay, these are the events we want to do. And let's say one of them is a egg hunt that for the whole 2,800 acres. Then we can nix that. And we say, no, you can't walk all over the whole 2,800 acres.
Right.
The other one is a bike ride that's on specific trails that are already there. Check, yes, you can, that's practical, we can do that. That can be in your plan. So once we have the person who's bringing the ideas and the events to us, then we can analyze where they want to be, what kind of event it is, and then we can contract accordingly.
I mean, we still
But-
have final say over if the event.
Every one of them,
Right.
yeah. They can come with events and we say, no, that's not the kind of events we want in our park.
Right.
There could be, I mean, they're going to come to us with ideas of things that they already do. I mean, that's part of the question is, what events have you already done? We're going to go check out how they turned out. Were they successful or not? The other thing that this does is also allows us plan in the future for budget purposes, what we can and can't do. If right now, if we have no idea and we're going to go out looking for it, then it's not going to happen. So I'm very much in support of finding out if there is somebody who would come and do this kind of thing under our guidance and guidelines of what we want, which, quite frankly, I know this is all boilerplate stuff, but it's pretty restrictive anyway. If I was bidding on it, forget that, I'm not messing with, that was
Yeah, it's very
ridiculous rules.
restrictive.
But that's another discussion another time. But, I mean, it's pretty broad right now. I mean, it really is very broad in the sense that we're just trying to find if there's companies that will do this.
Right.
And if there are, then you could go to the next step. So I don't feel like we're giving away anything or hurting anything. We're really just seeking information.
I agree with you, Mark, and I think waste is the wrong word for it, but I'm going to say wasting our time and our passion on what should be the next step in this process. Pat's experience, way beyond anything I have for evaluating these kind of things, that'll be in our next step. I think this is just a lot of extra time right now that I'd like to see because I want to see who responds. Then I want to see, wow, you're right, these people don't have any clue. How are we going to educate them? I just don't feel like at this point we know what we're even looking at. So I feel like, again, waste the wrong word, but I don't want to spend as much time on it as I want to spend on the next step where I want to see who responds and see what kind of people out there. Are they people that don't care about the environment? Are they out there to bike events and never even, because you would think any promoter nowadays would have this whole plan and include in his plan, I want to do a thing at Lake Leatherwood, but I'm going to protect the plants this way. I want to find out what your conservation effort. If they're not doing that, they're probably not getting as many jobs in this area. So I'd like to know if that's true or not. I hope it is.
Well, if you had been out at Lake Leatherwood and watched the construction of the downhill trails, you would have seen horrific destruction. Horrific destruction. I really don't think this community and that park deserves that. I'm not talking about the downhill trails as such. I'm talking about the way they were built, the way the park was left, the way that we're still engaged in trying to mitigate things that should have been included in the initial plan, of which there were no meaningful words. and no
Since
oversight.
this
But
is
we're
a
not
totally
talking
different,
about building trails.
yeah, it's a
Pat.
totally different thing, so.
But
I know you know that.
that's
I
not
know
the
you know.
point,
I
Kevin.
know.
It's not building trails, it's having events. Now, do people build trails when they have events out at the park?
No.
Yes, they do. Yes, they have.
Well, I know of one time they did, and I'm the one that saw it. I wouldn't complain to Huss. I mean, it's
They're not
just,
supposed to.
you don't do that.
And that's why it's be nice
the
to have
problem-
professionals that do it, because they won't do that.
The problem with Huss was he didn't know either. I mean, he just wasn't paying attention to it. So you're not the only one that felt that things were done improperly in the past. And we've addressed a lot of those things as we've moved forward and working with Scott over the last year. The contracts that we had for the events that took place in the park were a lot more succinct about what they can and can't do. And
So-
there's room for them to get better.
So shall we just cut to it here then? Can we say that everybody at this table, except for me, is okay with the RFP going out as it is? Is that the case?
Well, what I said was it would be perfectly all right to put something in that one description paragraph about the park to talk about the habitats and the areas of conservation concern. But it's completely inappropriate for it to imply at this point that a promoter is going to be responsible for protecting those areas. That's his job to protect those areas.
I have a request. So, as my time on the commission so far, a lot of times I've been brought a contract that's, set in place, and then it's a yes, it comes before the commission after with very little time in advance, and it's a yes/no vote. And I really appreciate that, you've brought this back to the commission and asked for input. I think that's really good. And I ask that as we go through this process, the commission can be kept informed, and if there's major decisions, we get a chance to vote on it.
And also, it's glad you said that, to remind all of us, and you and the new people too, part of that process to become informed isn't just at the meeting. If you have read through what has been emailed to you and you don't understand it, the one-on-one with Scott is the best way to get that. So that when you come to the meeting, you do know what's going on, and you don't feel like, I don't know what this contract is, I'm not sure. I think by the time you get to the meeting, you should feel informed and ready to
Yeah,
maybe a few questions.
But it's still kind of a yes/no vote. I mean, it isn't. Is it?
Sometimes, but not always. And I think that if you get to the meeting and everybody says, gosh, none of us understand it, we don't know what's going on, that's one thing. But if in the process of getting ready for the meeting and reading the materials, you really feel like you don't.
Yeah, it's not a question of understanding. It's a question of having some input into it. When it's a yes/no vote, it's all or none. You don't get input in sometimes. And I know that's probably Scott's job, but it would nice to have a way for the commission to have some kind of input. And we are in this process so far, but I'm just saying in the past that hasn't always felt like that.
Well, workshops to me are the place for this input.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
more casual.
yeah.
The meetings are
Yeah.
meant to be the time for the yes/no vote is maybe too dry a way to describe it, but it should be the final questions. It's the last process. By then, we
Right.
should have known. In fact, if you're not able to vote at that meeting, rather than spend an hour asking all the questions at the meeting, it's almost like we should table that, and we have a workshop to
Yeah,
discuss it.
yeah.
That's much more appropriate to
Yeah,
get what you're saying.
workshop is fine. Yeah, just as long as we're kept in the process.
The process should not be an hour on one thing at the meeting, if we're never going to understand it that way. Because you can't get the understanding at a meeting. The formal procedures in a meeting are different from the workshop. We need to have the workshop to have that understanding.
Well, personally, I was happy to see the coverage of the last several parks meetings by both the Citizen and the Independent. That lets the members of the public who read those papers know what's going on. I would say that it is the commission's duty to make further effort, further outreach to inform the public, the people who live here, what Parks is doing. Not just, what they're contemplating doing. All of
And
it.
that's a good comment, but I don't know how either to do that, Pat, because
Well-
I feel like sometimes
Well-
the blog, the meetings, there's nobody here listening to us right now, and they could be, well, there's a few, not nobody, I'm sorry. There isn't a room full of people with lots of, now, they can't ask questions here, but they could become informed. You're right, the paper is very important. I find most people do read the paper. You can tell by the feedback you get from people who've told you they read about it.
But many more people look at Facebook, Instagram, those social media. Many more people look at that. Now back to the website a minute. none of, excuse me, there are almost no postings on well, let me retract that. There is very little on the website and on Facebook about what Parks is doing and what we're contemplating doing. Now, I think that it is a matter worthy of budgeting to get someone who manages the website, manages the Facebook page, and who has technical skills, writing skills, and then it leaves to Scott to give them some information and some guidance. But I think we're kind of missing the boat on that. But that's a whole other issue.
Well,
But-
that's precisely what we're doing. I mean, that's what, he started the blog, 2 weeks ago?
But
Well,
I'm
Right,
saying that
that's
we need to budget, we need to put money into it because otherwise it just slips and slides away.
We had-
And I'm working some on those sorts of things. For instance, the blog is a start, of course. You had asked about the work prioritization, which I'll give the commission on about a monthly basis,
Yeah.
which informs you of what's coming up. And so if there's an issue, you can get it on the agenda for discussion or ask me to go in a different direction. One of the things that I hope to get to tonight is I really think it's time to start some of the committees up again. And I'll just say that and get to it in more detail in a few minutes. That's our best way for me to communicate in a greater level of depth with the public.
Well, if this were posted on the website and mentioned on the Facebook page that it's posted on the website, that would give the Eureka citizens a good idea, much clearer idea of what's going on. And I think they would like that.
I think, at the granular level that is, and that's basically his work list. That's
Yeah.
what he sits down with his team and goes over, weather permitting, certain conditions. That's really not something for public consumption.
Right.
It can be addressed a whole lot better in the blog on
Why-
a regular basis.
Why is it not for public consumption?
So,
Why not?
It can be a complicated thing. Read, for those of us who are
Well,
in the know.
Well, not only that,
You know, it's a
Some-
lot of detail.
I've got to say
And can
there-
change daily.
yeah.
It changes
yes, and
daily.
it does
Exactly.
change daily.
Depending on
That's
what
what I was going to
happens.
say, is that I can just see this where I put something like this on, and we'll take, here, repairs to Doughboy at Basin Park. That's been, what, 3 months at least, that I thought would be something that would take a few, and it's a contractor that's doing it. But he had to go out and find the marble that would match, and I could see, for me to have a date that's a due date, I mean, that's for my own calendaring, so I know whether I need to follow up on something.
Right.
But for the public to start looking at dates that I'm putting out there as projections, boy,
There needs to be, it
That's
needs to be
food for
intentional, it
complaints.
needs to be well-written, and it needs to communicate what's going on.
well,
What's
it's,
That doesn't,
And what's been
It-
done
it-
rather than what,
it is, it's possible to post something like this as a preliminary living document. I mean, at UNEP, we did that a lot. And, we were working on a massive document for 10 years. It was changing constantly, yet it was posted so people had access to it.
well, if we did end up hiring a professional person to, like when Christian, who was a commissioner, was doing some posting and some things like that, he would sometimes tell us, oh, no, that's not how people like to read things. If you would do it this way instead. People that do that for a living know how, they would say, don't put dates on there. No, that's bad. They'll drive you crazy. Put sometime this spring or whatever. Those kind of things. I think you're right, Pat, but I think that we don't have that yet. Right now, we just have Scott. Scott has to do what he can in the blog and all that. But maybe that is a good idea to work towards. Because the communication to the public has always been a problem. We know it's a problem. And that might be one more way to solve it. I don't know, so, but it's
Can I make a
not on
suggestion
the
that we
list.
finish this RFP
Thank you.
thing and be
I was going to say, it's not on the
completely
list, is where I was going with that, sorry.
Quite frankly, that was the only thing I saw that was on our agenda for our workshop was, I don't know if something else got added, but
No, that's it, thank you. I was kind of too long-winded to say that's not on the list, is where I was trying to go.
I do agree that on that page 8, it is worthy of writing something about the protected areas and the
Species of concern.
species and, all this, the language that goes with that. Because it's part of what makes it an attractive place for people to want to do an event there too. So I think that's perfectly fine. But I don't know if we're voting or we're just making
No.
recommendations, but I'm just saying, I say, let's find out what's out there and
Yeah,
So-
I'm anxious to get to that next step and then
So,
spend time.
so from what I'm hearing, what I'll do is I will add a paragraph or two about the sensitive areas within the park. I will email that to everyone, and then unless I get some sort of feedback that we need more or less on that topic within a few days, in fact, I'll say next Monday, I will go ahead and get this out to the papers for publication, and I'll get to work on a preservation plan, because in reality, that's what I'm seeing that we need, is something that will apply to this company and any other companies that do business with us in the park.
Well, I would, this isn't to do with the RFP, but I understand that we have contracted with Crafts and Toll to assess certain aspects of the park. I would suggest that we contract with someone else to continue the assessment of the natural assets of the park. Theo Witzel, whose report I shared and sent, he was out there for a few days and only looking at a small area of the park. There's much more out there than is in the area that he was checking. And he did a very thorough job, as you may have seen if you got to look through, if you had time to look through his report.
I've read it before.
That-
I've read it before too, yeah.
And that's one of the things that we have that is somewhat of a preservation plan, because he makes, in fact, that's why we are doing the glades, is because
I
we read it in
understand.
there that he
Yeah, I
said
understand.
these need to be restored.
He gave us a lecture
He
about the lizards
is one of
night.
our subject matter experts and will be out here soon, going physically and looking at these, I presume he'll be there, visiting these sites, giving us feedback on what we
Yeah,
need to do.
but
We can hire,
We paid him, though.
Well,
Parks paid him to come and do that assessment in the Old Miners Rock area.
and that's the point. We can certainly hire someone to do the preservation plan that I'm talking about. Maybe it does make sense to hire somebody to do that. That would take another RFP, probably, is the best way to go about it. And I can do that. Let's see what's out there. I'll add that to my list
You're
of
impossible list
So-
of jobs.
No, speaking of lists, I have a little list of other topics that we originally thought about discussing tonight. And I know, Scott, you mentioned a few you have priority over. The RFP is taking
Yes.
priority tonight. We're talking about it. You feel like you know what you're doing with it now. We're
Yes.
good. Are there anything else on our little preliminary list you think we really should discuss tonight? And the others we can
Yes.
delay?
I really think that we should discuss I'll combine two of them, the soccer league's continued use of the ball fields. Secondly, whether the use of the fields should require fees. And mind you, I'm not suggesting they should or shouldn't. That's our last area on fees that we have to address. One of the reasons for tonight, Tara, that is you on the second row, right?
Yes, it is. Hi,
I
Tara.
thought so. It's hard to see with it so dark back there. Tara Lewis is here, and I told her that I had hoped that we would discuss this tonight. She is with the soccer league, can answer any questions that we have and let us know her perspective. And along those lines, I'd like to throw in that the next item was going to be discuss reviving the ball field committee, a master plan committee, and the Springs Gardens and Greenhouse committee. And I think we should wrap those discussions into this as well, because I think the ball field committee especially is very much needed by, by me to be able to communicate well with the people that are using the ball fields. There are things that come up, things that I need to communicate to them, and other than having Sharea's number, I
You think
don't have a formal way to do that. So where we stand on this is there are no fees charged for use of the ball fields at this moment. You might recall some of our other fee structures are at any time we're using a portion of the park where it's being closed off to other users. So use of a ball field for a game would be included because no one else can use the field for that. Somebody out there playing Frisbee, no. But, so for events where we're closing down the fields for other uses, should we charge a fee for that? Another thing I don't think I added in there is Tara had stated in an email, or at least requested that we consider, if we do impose fees, that the soccer league be grandfathered, and perhaps she could speak briefly to that, as to why she feels that is or isn't appropriate. But it's the last thing that really we have to decide as far as fee structures. Put this in perspective, I just looked at what it cost us to maintain the ball fields. My estimation, and I've taken care of the grounds out there in an earlier phase of this, my career, and so I know that it takes about half of our time as far as the groundskeeper goes, is devoted to those ball fields. So I looked and we paid, in the last year, we paid our person who is the grounds coordinator, the groundskeeper, $27,425.25. So roughly $13,712 just for labor. I just estimate fuel as another $3,000. We also have electric for the lights of $1,240.54. We also, when I said fuel, I meant fuel and maintenance on the mower. And by the way, we need a new mower, or we will soon, within the next year or two. But the $3,000 included fuel and maintenance on the mower. So the total that we are spending on maintenance for those ball fields is approximately $17,953 a year.
Okay, that's good to
Do
know.
we recoup some of that through fees, or do we just simply look at it as that's part of the services we, as parks, provide?
So are we talking about, when the local kids come and practice their soccer, are we talking about that, or are we talking about when the special events and teams are coming from outside, or are we talking about both?
Both. And both with the understanding that Ms. Lewis at least has asked that we consider that given their long duration of use, and I understand the league was instrumental in having the ball fields built, and they raised funds, et cetera. So I assume that's some of what she would convey to us if she has the opportunity to speak. But those are the key issues. Do we have a fee at all? And then secondarily, does that same fee apply to the soccer league? And of course, we don't have a vote on it tonight, but if we were going to go in that direction, there might be some legal issues that we would want to confer with the city council on.
Scott, I haven't looked lately, but years and years ago, looking at this and being involved with it, and you're right, the soccer fields were built and maintained by the organization. We had a mindset when we compared how other parks dealt with their fee structure for their local soccer leagues is it really fair to charge those 12 kids and their parents in the soccer league for the fees because they're not the only ones using the field on that soccer day?
Yeah.
There's the spectators, there's the other people that come, there's the families, so should you charge everyone entrance to come into the field like some places do? And some tournaments, some sports leagues, like some of the youth leagues, require you to charge entrance to any tournament. You can't do it for free, you have to charge. Others require you to do it for free. There's all different rules. So at some point when we compared all those other things, we felt like given all that, the soccer league needs to just use it for free because they are locals who use our soccer field. Now, when they use the lights at night, that's where we drew the line back then because we felt there were a lot of adults and individuals playing on the fields for fun who requested the lights be on to play soccer. And there was a donation box, there was a fee structure, there was different changes back and forth where we asked them to contribute to the lights. It wasn't based on that they owed this much for the light, it was just what we seemed an appropriate amount for them to pay. I forget the amount now. But that's just my background on it. I was going to say, I haven't checked to compare what other parks do these days. Maybe you have, Tara. I should let Tara speak. Would y'all be okay with Tara answering a question at the
I would-
microphone for me?
Yeah, I would love to hear.
Everybody okay with that? Okay, Tara? Is there a microphone? Yes. Is it on? No, come use one of these. Okay. You can sit down there next to Pat if she doesn't mind you sitting close to her. Turn that one on. Hello. So what is let me ask you quick, 'cause I keep saying the soccer league. What's the official name of the soccer organization that you?
Eureka Springs Youth Soccer.
Okay. And that's the name that it's been all this time, the same, okay. Okay. I have a T-shirt that says that, but I didn't know if that was official.
Is the blue light on your microphone?
Here,
It is on. Blue light is.
you have to be real close to it.
Nope.
Not really.
Yeah.
Maybe that one's not working.
I can speak loud enough for everybody.
Yeah,
That'll be fine.
you can be
Just
loud.
speak louder.
There you go. You're loud, Tara. I know you're loud.
Well, it needs to be on the record, so
Oh, yeah.
probably ought to have one.
Put it in between there. Okay. So did you get a chance to meet with Scott? You two met in person since our last meeting to
No.
discuss it? So this is all just an
We
email
spoke
back and forth?
briefly after the last meeting, but
Okay.
we
Yes.
spoke over
That's
the
it.
phone.
Okay.
But since then, no.
So I think with the idea of the ball field committee, at one point we said, do we really need it? Would an advisory group be okay? If, Scott, you feel like a committee would help you better to have a formal structure to communicate with people?
For a multitude of reasons, but number one, I favor having some committees anyway. I'll be mentioning some others tonight because it enables me to get input from the public and vice versa. There were comments in our earlier discussion about notifying the public of things, and working with a committee allows in-depth discussions that, even though there may only be a few people there, they take it and disseminate it to those that they know and whatnot. So it would help for that. But it would also help me to communicate our needs to the users. For instance, the gate oftentimes is left unlocked, and people drive in there. We allowed it years ago. We allowed it years ago to allow the coaches to bring equipment and whatnot there,
Right.
but they leave the gates open, and people go down there, park on the grass, et cetera. So things like that I need, I need to be able to convey to somebody. So it works both ways. It allows them to give me their input, and I don't know that it has to be a formal committee. It could be, I mean, I almost hate that word committee anymore, but just me meeting with the ball field users on a once-a-month basis so that we can communicate accordingly. In other words, it doesn't have to be a committee that comes and reports to the commission and that sort of thing. But yes, a committee would be very helpful.
That's what it was before. It was a pretty informal kind of meeting in the office, and we would just discuss.
Yeah, I thought
And that's
I
really
thought-
all it needs to be. I mean, it doesn't
Right.
need to be a formal
formal
committee
committee,
structure.
I agree.
You just need to communicate with the
Exactly.
Yeah,
users.
you just call it
They
whatever
need
you
to
want to call it.
communicate
You
with
have your users group and,
Yeah, I thought that's what we agreed at the last meeting.
We did.
And if you don't need a commissioner there, I think it's fine. And you can still put it out to the public so they know it's happening. It doesn't need a,
yeah.
The only reason I raised it as an issue is I think it's our bylaws anywhere. One of the documents that apply to how we function does talk about commission-appointed committees that report to the commission, et cetera. I understand that to meet with a group of people, whether one or 20, I don't need the commission's
Right.
approval for.
Right.
But there was a discussion or a request of possibly having a ball field committee and other committees, and the only question is whether or not the commission wants to have one, and for the ball field committee, I certainly would say, no, I don't think, that's not what I'm asking
No.
for.
No.
For a ball field committee.
Yeah, you can call it your ball field group and meet them, and that'd be great. Then you can
Yeah.
report to us what happened, and we can report to you,
Right.
and we can, I like the informal, like you said before.
Yeah. When we talk about a few of the other committees, like the planning committee, that, I think really has to be appointed by the commission, and we'll talk about
Okay, so
reasons why.
let's stay focused on the ball fields
So Yep.
part right now. You were talking about fees. What is
Right.
what is the input that you're looking for?
Well, just discussions as to whether or not, number one, we want a fee for use of the ball fields, let's say exclusive use of the ball fields for an event, and then secondly, whether or not that would apply to the soccer league as well, or given the history of their use, should they be exempt? So those are the two things that we need. And keeping in mind that our manual, at least, that applies to the commission, requires the commission, not the director, to set fees. So it will have to come to a vote,
Right.
presumably next meeting, as to whether fees would be applied, and if so, would they also be applied to the soccer league?
And is this just semantics, but they're just reserving the field? They're not reserving they're not requiring the whole park for exclusive use of soccer practice, basically? Because people still walk around the track, people still walk when you're there at practice and in games. They're basically reserving the field, so.
The fields.
If you look at the fee structure, I think or lack of fee structure, or whatever you want to call it, I think that the term reserving the field makes much more sense than calling it exclusive use of the park
Yeah.
for soccer, because it's
I
not.
mean, the only reason I can think of that you would call it exclusive use is for the tournament.
Tournament,
And there's
yeah.
one tournament a year, right? The
We have
big
two
tournament.
tournaments, one in the spring and one in the fall, and I wouldn't even necessarily call it exclusive then. We don't say that, people cannot come and walk the trails or bring their dogs or anything.
The bikes.
The one thing I would say is that it's not as likely on those days because the parking is extreme.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Pre-COVID, you couldn't get anywhere near the parking lot. In fact, there are cars parked out on the road.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely, and across the street, and yeah, so, anybody really looking to come out for a nice day of hiking and bringing their dog is going to look at that and go, no, probably not today.
But does the league charge fees for the tournament participants?
We do not, and there isn't a single other school involved in the league that does either.
Yeah, none of the soccer ones that I remember years ago didn't,
No.
nor did any of the baseball ones. The only ones we found that did were any of the little kid football thing. That was the only sport around here that was required by a lot of the league laws to charge. All the others were required either not to charge or just didn't.
I cannot imagine trying to keep together a league over the last couple of years. And I mean, it must be very hard for leagues. I'm guessing they're not in the best of shape. They've got a lot of things to deal with coming back on, and how do they do this safely? So I really hope we don't come up with something that puts too much pressure that we don't have soccer. I mean, I think we really hope we will support them in becoming a strong team again.
We actually, I think the first year, it was a little, people were leery. Second year, not as much. And this year, I foresee people coming back even stronger.
I wonder, and I don't remember, remember the donation boxes we had out there a long time ago? Wasn't one of them down by the ball fields? I know you're laughing at me, because I know.
No, I'm laughing because somebody removed those without my knowledge or consent, and
Okay.
I was just telling somebody today to put them back
I
down.
saw it on your list too, but I remember during things like tournaments, once in a while, someone from another town would ask, your place is so nice here, I wish we could give something back. And I'd say, we have a little donation box down there somewhere, or go give some money at the concession stand. So people do want to, in those kind of situations, the tournaments want to, so if we give them the opportunity, maybe that will help offset, rather than making our local soccer group pay for it. Make those groups at the Jamboree be able to voluntarily pay if they want to or whatever.
I don't have a problem.
So it sounds like, I have an idea of how a vote would go, but again, because the rules require the commission to set fees, I think we should just get it on the agenda for our next meeting.
Okay.
And somebody may very well move that to have no fees whatsoever for the use of ball fields, but
Well, come to us with a proposal.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's the way it should work. You should come to us with a proposal.
As a new
and it'll-
commissioner, I would like to just have a little bit more of an idea of who uses the fields, how many different sporting groups use it, whether they're local or they're out-of-towners. I mean, my inclination is they're local people. They already pay taxes. They already paid these fees. It's not recouping anything. It's their money.
Right.
So I'm not likely to think we should charge them for that, but I'd rather have more information about who all uses
Okay.
it.
Well, I can answer
Just
that
a little
right-
bit more.
I can answer that right now, and it is essentially only the soccer league. Occasionally, like somebody wanted to do some Frisbee golf or something last year, and I let them go out there, and they were just paying us for the lights. I think I asked for $20 if they were using the lights, and that was it. And how many times they went out there, I couldn't even tell you, a handful at best. And that's really it. It is used essentially by the soccer league right now.
There is,
And people who don't want to use the dog park.
Yes,
Oh, yes.
yes.
Golly.
No, quite honestly,
Yeah.
I see more people out there with dogs off leash than I see kids playing soccer.
Yes.
And it's a bit troublesome,
Yeah.
and it's all locals who don't feel like they need to follow the rules.
Right.
I know, I wish we didn't have our dog park at Harmon Park. That sounds terrible. I wish.
Pardon?
No. No, but that dog park that we have at Harmon Park is small, and it is what it is, and I'm glad we have it. It's better than nothing. But I know that when we first formed it, the choice was that because we already have the park property, or should we look for something bigger? And I wish we had been able to at the time, because obviously people would rather use something bigger. They don't,
Yeah,
they do it at Leatherwood all the time.
Yeah.
It's terrible. But they don't know sometimes also. So, yeah, proposal for the fee thing that we can use as a part of the agenda
Okay.
would be great.
And then,
And then you can get together with Tara, and you can have your little,
right, it won't be a
Meeting structure.
commission-sponsored or established committee, but we'll be in touch by
Okay.
email and
Yeah.
set up a time to do that.
all right, sounds good.
Thank you.
Great, Thank you.
thanks, Tara.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too.
Well, there were a number of other things I wanted to talk about tonight, but it's almost 7:30, so I would like to just address a couple other committee issues, because there are some committees that I think it would be a good time to at least consider forming now that would be commission-created committees. I think we could definitely benefit even at this stage of the game by a master planning committee. And then also, this one may or may not need to be endorsed by the commission itself, but the Springs Gardens and Greenhouse Committee was, the last time we had it, it was created by the commission. I was the gardener at the time, and it was very, very effective. We ended up with something like a 43-page master plan for the gardens. And we're at the stage now where it would be helpful to do again. I could just, again, as far as a committee goes, I could meet with the same group, basically is still eager, with one or two exceptions, eager to fill that role. And I don't think that it needs to be one that reports to the commission, but obviously I'd like to hear from the commission on that.
So I have a question. So is this mainly going to be dealing with like choice of plants and small changes that would fall under your purview? Or is it going to be talking about some bigger changes that would need to come to the commission?
Both. First of all, there are 3 of our parks right now that are pretty torn up. One of them is Magnetic, which should be completed. The hardscape work that's being done should be completed within the next couple of weeks. And then, yes, we'll need to do some planting. The next one would be Crescent, that has a wall that collapsed, and another one that I'm concerned may collapse, and then some other related issues. That one, I definitely think the commission ultimately needs to weigh in on, because I believe that we would be addressing things like whether certain walls are being repaired, whether we're tearing up sidewalks and getting
Again,
irrigation lines
These
out.
are engineering issues. They're not a concerned citizen kind of issue. You're talking about risk of walls collapsing. And that is something that an engineer needs to evaluate.
Oh, yes.
If you're talking about changes to the park, if we're not going to put it back the way it was, then yes, there needs to be public input on any changes to it. But if it's physical repairs, I don't understand what you need a committee for.
Well, the committee goes in part to address the issues of the plans, but secondly, even as to the walls, it's not all engineering because, for instance, over at the library area, we have a very steep slope with a bunch of grasses and invasive plants, Vinca minor and some others, that frankly is ugly, and we can't do anything with it. We can't plant anything else there without maybe doing some terracing. So doing some terracing up there would be something that I would explore doing. But the main reason is to get the public involved in the process. I still hear a lot of complaints that the public's not involved in that process. Now, we can't involve the public in every thing that we do, we just can't. We can't have a meeting every time we want to go change the trash cans. But something like this, those spring gardens are very near and dear to the heart of people in Eureka Springs, and there's a lot of requests that, why don't the people have more input into it?
Well, Scott,
I don't disagree with that. But I think that when you're asking the commission to put, and really you're asking the chair to approve an ad hoc committee, ad hoc committees have a specific purpose. So what is their
Yes.
task at Crescent?
The task at Crescent would be twofold. Number one, to look at the hardscape issues and provide recommendations for what sort of hardscape changes may need to take place. And then secondly, what plants will be planted where, which of course we wouldn't need commission input on that.
But I think the hardscape issues are engineering issues. Those walls are failing for a reason, and to rebuild them properly needs the input of an engineer so that they don't fail again.
I understand that.
that would be, I would assume, Scott, your decision and discussion with that, not the committee to begin with. A falling wall would not be what these committees are for. It's for helping you get public input and plans. And what I'm hearing is you think the main purpose of these, and I agree with this, is that it does give another avenue for public involvement, public communication, public representation. I don't know, with the committee, like the ball field thing used to be a committee, and now we're saying it's a user group. What is another word for that? The Springs Committee, Garden Committee, why did they ever go away? We had them for a long time.
And that's kind of my point here is the mixed messages, and that's something that happens when you have a commission that changes, and we get new ideas and whatnot. But when I, as the gardener, wanted to incorporate native plants into the gardens, I was required by commission to do it through a committee that the commission established.
And
So that's,
that makes sense, because
and-
you were changing the nature of the gardens. They went from very ornamental plants to native plants. And so it made sense to get input on doing that, because you were significantly changing the way the gardens look. I'm using Crescent specifically because that is an issue, that is an infrastructure issue, a maintenance issue. Now, if you want to bring the Spring Gardens Committee back to provide input on how it's planted and what needs to come out, like some of the trees that are causing the
Right.
wall damage in the first place, that's a different matter entirely. But don't include the walls in that, because those are not something that anybody should be voting on. Me, as an architect, I would not provide input on that. I would tell you to go hire an engineer so that you know you're doing it right.
That's a good point.
Harding Springs, the next one, and as you know, because you and I have been out there looking at that together with a few other people, there's a lot more issues hardscape-wise there. That, I understand when you say a wall is an engineering issue, but as you know, out there, we had all sorts of things that we talked about. So again, just getting the public's input.
That's a different matter, and that, I would set up a committee specifically for Harding to discuss the things that need to be changed and corrected there.
Okay.
Because that really, you need to address that whole park needs to be rethought out.
Yes.
I mean, it's obvious, you go back through the historical photographs, the photographic archive of Harding, and that spring had, under the basin, rather than this tepid little pool and this tepid little stream that wanders off to a corner, there was a basin with a grate under it that very clearly drained to that culvert underground originally. Now, where that went and why it was ever eliminated, I don't know, but they were eliminated in a lot of the parks. That was the problem in Magnetic, was the original drainage tunnel had either
Oh, yeah.
collapsed or been removed when that steel culvert was put in the road, which caused all the drainage problems, which caused a lot of the deterioration problems and the safety issues. But yes, Harding should be a project in and of itself, because that park needs to be rethought out. It needs to be, I mean, quite honestly, the little pathway that goes over the little bridge over the tepid stream, and I mean, frankly, I think the whole thing is a tripping hazard. The wooden stair really needs to be rethought, because that doesn't meet any current code or safety standards at all. I mean, it's that
Did
whole
anyone
stair.
ever hammer the nails down?
I mean, the whole thing is just, it violates every single code standard for stairs. So yes, there needs to be a complete rethink of that park.
So how about this, Scott? Why don't you make a specific list of this, the ball field, we're not going to call it committee, you're going to call it Directors Advisory Group, or whatever you want to
I'll come
call
up
it.
with
Let's
something.
call it that. Let's write that down. The Springs Committee, the Gardens Committee, you're looking for public input on planting. Maybe a better way to word that is, that's what you really want to call it. If you want to talk about that being a committee
Advisory
or
group.
advisory group, whatever you want to
Sure.
call it. The group advisory, yeah, it's not an official advisory group. Terminology, well, is it Jones? Couple of places in the state of Arkansas, they don't have a commission, they have
Department?
department, and then they have advisory groups that are official advisory groups that give input to the, and it's different, so I'm
Structure.
afraid to use that word for that thought of that structure, but yeah, whatever you want to call it, Scott, maybe we should talk about, if you just make a list of what you think these things should be more specific.
Well, the advisory groups, I'm hearing that the commission doesn't need to be involved in.
Okay.
But I'll propose on the next agenda.
Okay, sounds
um,
good.
For the next agenda, establishing an ad hoc committee for the Harding Spring. But lastly is the Master
Master
Plan
Plan.
Committee. And I've heard from several of you, some of you have the ideas that we should have a committee at this point and some not. And that's why I think it's maybe time for
Ruth?
discussions that
Sorry, go ahead.
well, then let me just state for the public, I think all of you know this, that right now we're doing a lot of assessing. We're hiring architects, engineers, we're just trying to find out what do we have, what issues are we dealing with? And so at least one commissioner's comments to me have been, well, that's not really planning yet. We don't need a committee yet. At least one other has expressed that, well, even in this early stage of the game, we should have the public involved. This is a committee that would have to be appointed by the commission, so it would be something that if we were going to do it now, then it would take action by the commission.
Go, Pat.
As I raised the issue at an earlier meeting, the Parks Policy Manual calls for a standing long-range planning committee.
Long-range plan, that's what it says.
And I very much think we need that. And that we'd be,
Remember you saying that.
if we had such a committee, we could work in some collaboration with this public committee.
I thought we had tied that in with our finance committee, hadn't we,
No,
before? No?
No, that was
Am I wrong?
budget, that was
Yeah,
budget
the-
planning.
Sorry, budget
It's a
planning,
different thing.
budget planning.
Problem with those committees that we found is there's no definition for what those committees do.
Right.
I mean, other than finance. Finance was the primary need that we had
I'll look that
last
up.
year. And the long-range planning committee, what we were looking at was we've got probably 10 years of just deferred maintenance issues to deal with. that's really what the long-range planning is, just prioritizing the maintenance issues that we have to address. You know, again, I will go to, if you form a committee, what is their task? What is their defined role? And what is their deliverable? And the ad hoc committees that are set up by the commission, by the chair, are on-the-record committees. They include
Yes.
commissioners, and so you need to define what their role is very
Right.
specifically.
Their role is going to be to define the assessment and the planning process and to make recommendations accordingly to the commission.
But it seems like that's a little hard to do when we don't have any results from any of the assessments
Right.
yet.
I mean, that's why you need the assessment done, to understand what needs to be addressed in the
Okay.
parks. I mean, we're not going to know what we have to do in Basin Park until they're done doing the assessment. I mean, it could well be that they come back and say that all of the walls need to be pulled out and rebuilt because they don't have adequate drainage behind them. I mean, we already know that the band shell is
Yeah,
probably going to have to be completely rebuilt
yeah.
from the ground up. So until we know all these things, there's nothing for a committee to advise on.
If their duty is to advise versus just listen to the progress along the way, I'm not sure, I think that's a point I hadn't thought of. Without a time structure, so by this date next year, we hope to have this assessment done. What is the time scale on a long-range committee? Is it a 6-month planning committee? Is it a permanent, we always talk about our plans? I'm starting to kind of wonder,
I
too,
think
how
if
do
all
you
the-
define it?
Sorry.
I agree with the need for something like this, from something like it for the input. It makes people, it's another place for people to have input. But how do you define it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, yeah.
and keep in mind, one of the reasons for me mentioning this as possibly
Mm-hmm.
being needed is I've heard from commissioners both ways, that yes, now's the time and now's not. But the main thing is, even though right now we're doing assessment, to me, that's part of the planning process. So during the
We need to
assessment,
wrap this up and vote on the minutes.
Yes,
Very
yeah,
well.
We've got to get this taken
actually,
care of.
let's do that. Yeah, and let's
But
that-
I would say again, Scott, I understand that there is pressure. There is always pressure that we're not communicating well enough. There's not getting enough input. It doesn't really matter what we do. There are always going to be some complaints in that regard. But a committee needs to have a defined purpose. Putting a committee together and just saying, we're doing an assessment, go tell us what you think. I mean, I don't know what you expect to get out of that.
Yeah. Well, the one purpose I can see for a committee right now would be to inform the public, and not necessarily the general public, but people that are interested enough to show up to a meeting and let them know what the different assessments are, and just have it be as a communications tool.
Oh, that's not really a committee, that's a communications tool.
Yeah.
Is that a committee or is that I don't know, what do you call that?
another advisory
An
group?
advisory, is it advisory group or is it
Don't
a?
they all end up being the same people? I mean, in
Yes.
my
Same people
experience
anyway,
in this.
you're right. It's the same people.
They end up being the same exact people doing the exact same, because there's that limited number of people who care. I think the planting thing, though, honestly think you could get a wide variety of people who actually care. Because I've heard a million times, I hate this native plant thing. I really want it to be ornamental. And then I hear, I really love this native plant. So I think you can get plenty of people that have that. I trust that you know what you need and when you need it. So as from my commission seat, I say, when you think you're ready to have a committee and you're ready for them to help you determine and help us determine what 5-year plan we need in order to do which tasks first, then I'm 100% in support of you doing that committee. But if you don't think you have anything to actually have them do except say they're on a committee, you got bigger fish to fry than worry
yeah.
about managing 10 other people, right? I mean, that's just my thoughts on the subject.
Yeah, no, it could end up being those same people just giving you, but if your focus was prioritization, whatever, I don't know, we'll have to kind of save the rest of that for another day. But you really do want to have this, while we're all still here. Let's start our special meeting. I'm going to look and see what time it is. Okay. This is the special meeting for the Eureka Springs Parks and Recreation Commission, Tuesday, March 1st, 2022, 7:40 PM at the auditorium. May I have a roll call and make sure we have quorum?
Yes, Jonathan Teagan,
Here.
Mark Ingram,
Here.
Kevin Rouley,
Here.
Ruth Hager,
Here.
Sue Hubbard is here. And Pat just walked out.
Pat had to leave, and Director Scott is here. Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda for the meeting,
So
special
moved.
meeting? Was Kevin? Have a second?
A second?
Was that Mark?
Yes.
Was Mark? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Let's see, I shall read the new business. Says, our purpose is to approve the minutes from February 15th, 2022, regular meeting of the Eureka Springs Parks and Recreation Commission. That is our business for this meeting. Do I have a motion
I so
to,
move.
is Kevin? A second?
I'll second.
Is Mark? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 4-0. The minutes from the February 15, 2022 regular meeting are approved. A motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Mark? Was Kevin? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. I don't say aye. Motion passes 4-0. We are adjourned from our special meeting. Time is 7:41. Thank you.
So,
Okay.
Scott, on the, you and Nikki are going to be handling this with the bank. You're going to let everybody know when they have to go